My brothers and sisters in Christ, last week we explored the first 3 chapters of the book of Genesis and the first reading each day, which took us through the 2 different accounts of creation and the story of the fall. So with the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the garden, we pick up in our reading through Genesis today with what begins in the next several chapters as an unfolding of the generations. And this is the span going from Adam and Eve up until Noah. So today we start with the story of the second generation, and that is of Cain and Abel after Adam and Eve. And in this infamous story of Cain murdering his brother Abel, there's a couple things we can immediately see. One is, and I want to be clear up front, the brevity of this reflection doesn't allow me to dig into the controversy today, but there's been a lot of talk about a concept known as the Ordo Amoris of late, all starting from a reference that Vice President J.D. Vance made, responses from the Holy Father, other bishops, theologians, all chiming in. That this is a concept that goes back in the history of the church, and I hope I can have a chance sometime soon to, in a more intentional setting, to break it open. But in the Ordo Amoris, as understood by St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, there was an idea of how love was first realized, interpreted, and where it branched out forth. And that is, first of all, the love of God, where God knows us deeper than we even know ourselves. And so love of God begins first, then the love of self, which comes next, not in an egotistical way, but an understanding of our dignity, which then spills forth into love of neighbor. And so these 3 loves are packed in this way. This is a real simplification of the Ordo Amoris. But what we saw in the fall, in original sin, was 2 of those being violated. So first of all, the sin against God. So the harmony of love existing between all parties. But then through the temptation of the serpent, Adam and Eve got the serpent got Adam and Eve to sin against God, to distrust God. So there was a rupture in the relationship between God and man. Then they fall out of alignment within themselves. Their eyes are open. They realize they're naked. They're afraid in these various ways. And so Adam and Eve are expelled. Well, now in the next generation, we finally see the third consequence, violence, man versus man. And so we get this jealousy as God prefers Abel's sacrifice to Cain's. We don't know why. And we're not told that God rejected Cain, just that God looked on Abel's offering more favorably. But in his envy, Cain then turns to violence against his brother and commits mankind's first murder. And so we've seen the full consequences of sin already very quickly come to bear. But something else that's worth our unpacking as we move forward in these days is that we see already the beginnings in very cryptic form lineage that forms. We see the consequences put on Cain. And we'll see that 7-fold in his generation, all the way down to Lamech, that the evil compounds in the line of Cain. And Abel was seen as the favored one, and then Seth will become of the pure line. We're told of this, and it's considered that of the ancient characters in Genesis, the good ones are coming from the line of Seth, the bad ones from the line of Cain. The ways in which they relate properly to God in some ways, or those that compound the sin of Cain. And so keep this in mind when we'll see references on the forms of marriage between the sons of God and the daughters of man. And many have questioned what this means over time. And there's several that the church doesn't officially endorse any one of them. There's been several theories. But the one that's most consistent with the scriptures is that already we see that there is always a faithful shoot, and then there are those that go further away from God. And this, if we hold on to this understanding, we'll see this with the line of Noah, then as the story gets on to Abraham and his sons, this constant splitting of the family tree into a line staying true to God and a line that does not. And as we get to the families of nations, that God constantly chooses one or chooses a people to try to come back and bring news to bring others back to God. And so, this is an important reminder for us as we continue through the story to remember this. Not just how sin has compounded and the offenses against love, but already the formations, the divisions in the human family that are forming. May God bless you all.